After discovering my wife was cheating with a celebrity athlete, I vanished without a trace, took revenge quietly, and started a new life she'll never find. I can't believe how messed up my life has become in just 4 years. 4 years ago, my wife started working at Gilbert Endeavors. Our kids were teenagers, and Sarah couldn't wait to leave the house. Back then, an entry-level secretarial job seemed like the right choice. I'm Skip Trexler, but everyone calls me Skip. I was a wiry guy, average height, weighing less than 140 pounds in high school. I wasn't into sports, but I enjoyed long-range shooting. Throughout high school and college, I spent most of my free time either shooting or reloading. After 8 years, I became skilled at hitting a 2-inch target at 100 yards. My favorite weapon was the Marlin 336C with a caliber cartridge 2-19. Even though this cartridge was no longer in production, I made my own from 30-30 shells. Achieving success in this gave me a much-needed sense of pride. 2 important things happened in college. I met my wife, Sarah, and my future business partner, Chuck Fuller. Besides, it was a bit boring. I got a degree in geology, got married, and started a small surveying business with Chuck. Life was good. We never worked for anyone after college. We each invested $2,500 and started our own small surveying company. We focused on small jobs and real estate sales. We didn't make a lot of money, but we felt comfortable and happy. Chuck married a local girl 3 months after Sarah and I did. My family had a bungalow in Schuylkill County on 160 acres, where we held all our family gatherings when I was younger. The Fullers had a cabin on 640 acres in Potter County. Chuck and his family only used it for hunting. That's all you need to know for now. As I mentioned, my life started going downhill about 4 years ago. Gilbert Endeavors designed and manufactured trainers. Though their headquarters were local, they had manufacturing plants and distribution centers across the country. Sarah, my wife, started working there when our twin daughters, Marcy and Mercy, entered high school. Initially, it seemed like a good idea, good hours, fair pay, and a convenient location. The first year or so was perfect. Gilbert Endeavors hired Terry Ulrich, a former NFL quarterback, as a marketing manager and company spokesman. Unfortunately, my wife worked in the marketing department. For 6 months, we were bombarded with stories about the magnificent Terry Ulrich, and my wife and daughters were crazy about his greatness. Luckily, the adoration faded after about 6 months. Around the same time, Sarah started working overtime. Chuck and I, being locals, knew many people working at Gilbert. It wasn't hard to find out that Sarah and Terry Ulrich had become a couple. As their relationship grew, our marriage deteriorated, and I grew distant from my daughters. I never told her about this. She began to travel more on business and promotional trips, and I became a non-entity. Most of the time, she invited me to parties and gatherings where I was ignored for the entire evening. Closeness was out of the question. How can someone endure such a life? Before Sarah started working, our family life was normal. Weekends and vacations with the whole family, ballet lessons, football, PTA, and scouts. Every week, we had a pizza night. The only thing the girls didn't like was spending time in the bungalow. All of that is in the past now, disappearing over the past few years. Sarah's conference attendance, retreats, and meetings gradually increased. Lately, on several longer trips, she took the girls with her, never inviting or asking if I wanted to go. I often overheard the girls telling their friends about the great time they had. They never said anything when they knew I could hear. Terry Ulrich was never mentioned, although I knew he was on every trip. At Gilbert's New Year's party, everything fell into place. It was hard for Sarah not to invite me. I didn't want to go. The humiliation of facing infidelity alone was bad enough. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to control myself if things got out of hand. I was right. All the girls were dressed up, excited for their first adult party. I didn't have a tuxedo, so I wore the best suit I had. When we arrived, there were hundreds of people milling around. "Skip Trexler, it's good to see you. Thank you for bringing your wife and beautiful daughters," Terry Ulrich said. He seemed to smile as he squeezed my hand, and Sarah smirked. The girls looked at me with disgust and quickly left. It was the start of a terrible evening. I drank a glass of beer and hid in a corner, trying not to embarrass my wife and daughters even more. I didn't say or do anything, yet I managed to ruin the start of their evening. Terry Ulrich was a big guy, really big, at least a foot taller and 100 pounds heavier than me, all muscle. He embodied happiness and success. My daughters flocked around him, while my wife spent most of the evening next to him, lightly holding his hand. Lower-level people made feeble attempts to talk to me, and mid- and senior-level managers noticed me, smirking or making sly remarks related to my new status. I didn't hear their words, but it was clear what was happening. My beer was replaced with a simple ginger ale, which I sipped slowly. I usually kept myself in control and took pride in never losing my composure. People started dancing, and I noticed the girls having a good time, including my wife with Ulrich. In the last 3 hours, neither she nor the girls spoke to me. A small group on the dance floor pointed at Sarah and Ulrich, laughed when they looked my way, and quickly turned away when I caught them giggling. That marked the end of my evening. I put the glass down, headed to the door, and saw Ulrich with his hands on my wife's rear while she caressed the back of his head. Before I knew it, she pulled his head down and gave him a big kiss on the dance floor. It took me less than 5 seconds to cross the room, spin Ulrich around, and hit him as hard as I could with a roundhouse right. My arm hurt like hell, and the next thing I knew, I was waking up in the back of an ambulance. The ride to the emergency hospital was a few minutes, and I noticed I was the only one in the ambulance. I remembered being wheeled into the emergency room and waking up in a recovery zone. A doctor visited me half an hour later, sharing the latest news on my condition. Besides the broken arm, I had 3 broken ribs, a broken nose, 3 knocked out teeth, and 2 loose ones. My jaw was clamped with wire, and my right kidney was bruised. Ulrich finished it off with a good blow to the testicles, causing several blood vessels to be damaged. The doctor said I could be discharged in about 4 days, but I'd have to spend at least 2 weeks in rehab. I chose the first option. Late afternoon, my wife and daughters finally appeared. Sarah looked annoyed, the girls looked bored, and nobody said anything. With my tense jaw, I hesitated to start a conversation. I could talk, but I didn't want her to know. Assessing her attitude, I decided I didn't need this conversation. Instead of answering, I just muttered and pointed at my jaw. We sat there for a good minute before she spoke again. I was embarrassed, she conveyed. She said the girls were so humiliated that we had to leave before the new year. The whole evening was ruined, and for what? She expressed regret, mentioning she should have known what it would be like to take me out in public. She guaranteed that nothing like this would happen again. Little did she know how right she was. I just sat and looked at her, unable to manage a smile, so I didn't do anything. They lingered for several minutes, and since I didn't react, they eventually got up to leave. Chuck showed up a couple of hours later. We chatted for a few minutes. Yes, I could talk then. He pulled out the local newspaper. I made it to the front page. The story was about how I attacked my wife at the Gilbert Endeavor's New Year's Eve party. Chuck and I talked for a couple of hours, discussing several options. After he left, I refused dinner and asked for sleeping pills. I needed a good, long rest. Most of the next day involved being checked, probed, and poked. All damage was discovered and appropriate measures were taken. Now, all I could do was wait and heal. A hospital staff member gave me a list of recommended rehab centers, and I chose one near Hamburg. Chuck showed up later that evening. I sold my share of the company for $2,500. with the handshake being the most important part of the deal. I was still a CO owner, but not on paper. Good things take time. We laughed about the fact that 1 week in rehab cost $2,500. Sarah and the girls never saw me again in the hospital. They came back the day after I moved into rehab, annoyed that they weren't notified. They were very angry when they came to rehab and were denied access. It looks like I was able to specify who could and couldn't visit. When I logged in, an orderly informed me they were trying to meet with me. My ribs hurt like hell when I laughed, and the worst part of my injuries was the dental work. Luckily, they had a dentist who could work on-site for a certain fee, and I decided to take advantage of this. The wound on my hand wasn't as serious as they initially thought. Although I had the opportunity to leave rehab a little earlier, I decided to stay for the full 2 weeks. 10 days later, I was able to breathe deeply again. It was nice. Sarah never tried to visit me again. The National CrossFit Show happened in Atlantic City on the second weekend of February. Sarah and the girls were in attendance, along with Terry Ulrich and the Gilbert Endeavor's marketing team. Chuck and some of our team spent the weekend moving my stuff to a bungalow in Schuylkill County. He made sure to take my Marlin rifle and reloading supplies. In 2 days, I was settled in my new home. Chuck and his wife, June, visited that weekend. It seemed Sarah was looking for me at the office. There had been no deposits into the joint account since the year began, and Sarah wanted an explanation. Chuck spent half an hour explaining that I no longer owned part of the company and didn't work there. In desperation, she ran out, threatening to meet with a lawyer. After a couple of weeks, I was back to normal, doing therapy and exercises as directed. Chuck left me with a company truck and a credit card. I also took a substantial amount of cash with me. I left my phone with Chuck. The bungalow was cozy, but temporary. I walked and started jogging leisurely. Terry Ulrich had a large house on Duryea Street, just outside of town. It was a long, winding road up Mount Penn with few houses due to the steep mountainside. Finding the house wasn't hard, and I found good, secluded vantage points. Every morning, I exercised to get in shape. After lunch, I practiced target shooting, focusing on inanimate targets. My Bushnell laser rangefinder indicated I needed to be accurate at 133 yards. I bought a lot of eggs and a muffler. Evenings were spent planning, adjusting, and recharging. I grew a beard. Chuck visited every 2 weeks while Sarah tried to find me at the office, but gave up after 2 months. Chuck brought newspaper clippings, showing my wife and daughters enjoying the high life with their new benefactor. Sarah and the girls still lived in our old house, puzzling me. It was time to move on. I started heading back into town early in the morning to watch Terry's house. He swam 50 laps every morning, even in a heated pool. On weekends, I went to Potter County. The move from a bungalow to a hut was welcome. No electricity, running water, or cell phone signal. The nearest Walmart was a 45-minute drive in Olean, New York. I stocked up on everything for the next 4 months. Early Wednesday morning, I moved my stuff from the truck into my Subaru Outback. I parked the company truck at a construction site and climbed to my chosen vantage point in the morning. I set up a tripod with a round in the chamber and 2 at the ready. 20 minutes later, Terry Ulrich went out for his morning swim. The first shot shattered his right ankle. Even with a muffler, it was noisy this early. 2 seconds later, his left knee exploded, and I loaded the next 2 rounds, taking out his left elbow. My final target, his right wrist, was hard to aim at due to his erratic movements. I left quietly. 10 minutes later, I left the construction site and returned to the office to the Subaru waiting for me. I didn't go back to the bungalow, but straight to Potter County. The first step was to clean the water source for fresh water. After that, I collected firewood and found the cabin well insulated and watertight. LED lights replaced old carbon oil lamps. Soon, everything was under control, and I started shooting again, this time at paper targets. In the middle of the second week, I saw her for the first time. She was a tall woman on an old logging trail with a backpack. She passed by, and I set up a fire pit with coffee and cookies, feeling like I was setting a trap. 3 days later, my trap worked. Claire apologized and introduced herself. She expressed a hope for conversation, and we sat down. I offered her some coffee, the best I could do. She nodded, smiled, and took off her crossbow before sitting down. I shared that my name is Skip and that I arrived here about 2 weeks ago. I mentioned spotting her in the area a few times and staying at a lodge about a mile from there. I explained my daily routine and handed her a cookie. I inquired about the duration of her stay, and she said she'd be there until the end of the summer. I mentioned my plans to stay for at least 4 or 5 months. She seemed to enjoy my cookies, although I sensed she preferred cream and sugar in her coffee. Noticing her silence, I asked if the property belonged to her. She clarified that it belonged to her friend, who allowed her to use it. When she asked if I was hunting, I explained that I used to shoot a little but hadn't done anything for years. Currently, I was just doing some target shooting. I then invited her to use the shooting range for practice with her bow. She had an accent I couldn't quite place, but I refrained from asking about it. She accepted the offer and ate a second cookie, leaving me with a good feeling. I couldn't help but express my curiosity. I thought most folks use compound bows nowadays, but your recurve bow looks brand new, I said. Trust me, it has better curvature, she replied. She used lay arrows for target practice, but always had 4 hunting arrows mounted on her bow. That evening, I drove several miles down the road and picked up 3 bales of hay. This marked the beginning of my summer with Clare Charles. Claire visited daily and returned home every evening. The lodge staff tracked her through her cell phone, so they always knew her whereabouts. At the start of our second week, a strong summer squall hit us. We huddled on the cabin porch, laughing and poking fun at her predicament. Without saying a word, she took out her phone and called the lodge, explaining that she couldn't return due to the weather and had found a comfortable place to stay for the night. I was both surprised and delighted. This is how my platonic relationship with Clare Charles turned into a close one. From then on, we alternated our sleeping spots. Highlands Lodge felt out of place in Potter County, being luxurious and expensive. Most guests were from overseas, and Claire's family hailed from Cornwall. The lodge provided hot showers, abundant food, and laundry services, which I fully utilized. Outdoor activities are enjoyable, but they're even better with everything you need. We spent less time at the shooting range. A couple of weeks later, while having lunch, Chuck and June arrived. June seemed especially pleased that I had a companion, more so when she realized it was a full-fledged relationship. We kept a low profile for the first few hours, and then June and Claire went off to chat. After the tragic attack on Terry Ulrich, I became the primary suspect. This posed a more significant problem for Terry than he anticipated. The press wanted to know why I was the main focus of interest. As they delved into it, things got worse for Terry and my wife. Though the spotlight was on finding me, the press quickly shifted to the relationship between Terry and my wife. 3 weeks later, Terry Ulrich was no longer representing Gilbert Endeavors. Police checked the Schuylkill County bungalow and found it empty. They had no credit card leads, no phone calls, and no idea where I might be. They never questioned Chuck about the cabin. Chuck mentioned that Sarah came to the office several times, trying in vain to find out where I was. She seemed desperate as her source of money dried up. According to Chuck, Terry lost interest in her and blamed her for his problems. I had no plan for the next step. I couldn't go back and had no other options I wanted to explore at the moment. I was drifting. As we neared the end of the year, I felt myself becoming complacent. I was happy and content with Claire, but I should have paid attention to my real life. It was a cool autumn day, and I was alone in the hut. Something was wrong, but I couldn't figure out what it was. I had just heated up the wood stove and made coffee when the door suddenly swung open. Terry Ulrich was just as big and ugly as the last time I saw him. He stood in the open doorway with a wide smile on his face and an old police SWAT pistol in his right hand. He seemed to stand unsteadily and held his left arm at an odd angle, as if trying to maintain his balance. We just stood and looked at each other. I expected some profound words of revenge, but nothing came. "Coffee, fool? I spent over $10,000 to find you." "No, I don't want any damn coffee," he said. "Well, what can I do for you?" I asked. "I know it was you, you sneaky little weasel. Your wife told me that you did a lot of target shooting. I hope there are special services here because they will be needed," he said. His face became swollen and red as he spoke. He seemed to be driving himself into some kind of rage. Suddenly, a shocked expression appeared on his face. He dropped the weapon and fell to one knee. Terry Ulrich rolled over on the floor and howled at the top of his lungs. About 12 inches of a crossbow bolt protruded from his left buttock. The remaining 6 inches were buried deep and firmly. Claire just stood in the doorway and smiled. We ran almost all the way back to the Highlands. I didn't take anything with me from the cabin. It took Claire about 15 minutes to load all her belongings into the rented Land Rover. We laughed the whole time like a couple of high school kids. Finally, we calmed down to a fairly normal state. When we reached us 80, breakfast was comforting and filling. I assumed he had already removed the arrow and gone to the hospital. Claire expressed doubt, suggesting that he should call special services since she had shot him with one of her 3-bladed hunting arrows. She explained that it needed to be cut out and couldn't be pulled out. I predicted that he would likely have to lie on his stomach on a gurney when he went to the emergency room, which must be awkward. I mentioned the predicament to Miss Clare, stating that it seemed like we were in big trouble now, and I playfully attributed it to her. She flicked a forkful of scrambled eggs and laughed. After breakfast, I called Chuck, and Claire called someone else. I brought him up to speed, and he seemed to find it quite funny. I told him we were going to Ocala, Florida, where my grandparents lived. He chuckled a little because he knew I only said that to cover his ass. While I was on the phone, Claire came over and took my wallet out of my pocket. She returned to her seat and continued the conversation. While I bought treats for our trip, I didn't know where we were going, but I felt like Claire had a plan. She didn't tell me anything, and I didn't ask. I was happy with my ignorance and trusted her. It was a tiring day, and we finally found a great bed and breakfast in the Wisconsin valleys to rest. Exhausted from the road, we quickly fell asleep. The breakfast was fantastic, and 4 hours later, we reached the Duluth Walmart. Claire had her belongings, but I left with nothing. She kept me in the dark about her plans, and it seemed like she was having fun doing so. I got a new set of clothes, and Claire grabbed a big bag of snacks. Since I was a kid, I always dreamed of canoeing on lakes, and now I finally got to do it. Everything was arranged upon our arrival, and the outfitter even took care of Claire's rental car. This hinted that we probably wouldn't be coming back. It was both intriguing and exciting, and I couldn't wait to see what else Claire had in store for me. Before departing, I made a final call to Chuck. He informed me about Ulrich's latest failure, which had become a significant news story, even picked up by national services. June's laughter echoed in the background. Chuck shared that Ulrich's media image was plummeting, and he couldn't seem to do anything right. He expressed his satisfaction, stating that it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Chuck also mentioned that Sarah was clueless and broke after the divorce, which apparently hit her hard. I was taken aback and clarified that I didn't consult a lawyer and wasn't aware of any divorce. Chuck insisted, claiming that Sarah was ranting about it that morning and asked me to stop by the cottage to pick up his things and car since he was in Moss Bluff, Florida, looking for a trailer to rent. Claire waved from the dock as the loaded canoe awaited. Grateful for my Boy Scout camp experience, at least I didn't feel like a complete idiot in the canoe. We spent the next 6 days exploring the lakes, setting up camp each night. Claire, using her cell phone GPS, navigated us seamlessly. I enjoyed the trip and, most notably, the nights filled with starlit closeness. The following day at noon, our adventure continued. A man met us at a remote road pier, hugged Claire, and they spoke in French. About half an hour later, he handed Claire the keys to a truck, along with a large envelope. We unloaded the canoe and hit the road. Looking back, I saw him push off from the dock. Driving, Claire rummaged through the envelope, mentioning that I would have to get used to being called Clinton. Really? I gave her a puzzled look. She giggled and handed me a Kentucky driver's license with my photo, now labeled Clinton Barfield. I questioned if she was kidding, to which she responded with a firm, nope. She informed me that I was now Clinton Barfield and proudly presented my new Canadian passport. She mentioned that we were currently in Canada. 4 days later, we arrived in Newquay. 2 hours after that, we were at Claire's family home near St. Austell. It felt like I was born there. I was comfortable and content. The prospect of meeting Claire's family worried me. The mansion was enormous, and her father invited me to his office. Against the far wall was an elegant walnut weapon cabinet. He reached inside and handed me a rifle, my Marlin 336C with a chamber in it. I realized I was home. I never heard from Sarah or the girls again. Chuck and June received strange Christmas cards every year from Mr. and Mrs. Clinton Barfield. They had no idea. This year, the card will feature a photo of us with our 3 children. I'm sure he'll figure it out.